call this What You Really Are, a Solution to the Puzzle of Personal Identity. And I've got this in sections. In section 1, I call the classic debate about personal identity. What is it that makes a person in the future be the same person I am now in the most basic sense? That is, what makes it right for me now to anticipate that person's pain, not with the sympathy I might have for another, but rather with the self-interested concern that is appropriate only if that pain is mine? What is it that will extend me there to being that person? Here are the two most popular answers to this question. A. What is essential to remaining me is the sameness of a certain thing. For some who claim this, the thing that has to be the same is an immaterial mental substance. Descartes, I think, is an example of that. For others, the thing is the body, and more particularly the brain. Whatever alterations might occur in the thought that happened to belong to this thing, including amnesia and false memories, the person would stay me, and any pains would be mine, so long as the crucial thing in which the thought occurred remained the same one. B, the other main view on this. What is essential to being me is rather the continuity of the pattern and process of my thought, regardless of the identity of the things in which that might be continued. Any new mental substance or brain into which my ongoing pattern of memories and intentions was somehow transferred would, for reason of that transfer alone, have become my mental substance or brain. The person in whom my thought process continued would, of course, in that thought, think of himself as being me. And he, I in other words, would be right. That would be me. The pains experienced there would be my pains, and my self-interested concern should be relocated there. Locke is certainly a prime example of a philosopher who holds this view. Sorry for the date. That's okay. Note that each side of this debate has the upper hand when it is arguing positively that the person would remain the same if that side's criterion for personal identity obtained, even if the other side's criterion became wholly absent. Indeed, one can easily imagine a person's remaining in the same body with an experience of amnesia or false memories. And yet, one can easily imagine also a person going along into a new body with a transfer into it, not of a thing, but only of his mental pattern, somehow, let us say, impressed into the brain of that new body. I hope to show how the strengths of both positions can be combined in a view that the person remains the same both with any mental pattern and in any body. Note also that in this old debate on personal identity, all that is questioned is which condition preserves me. The debate ignores completely the primary question, which is what made a mental substance or a brain or a psychological process be mine instead of somebody else's in the first place. My view will answer that question. The second section is brain bisection. It will help us to shift our consideration to the proper question about personal identity if we look at a case that is troubling for those on both sides of the old debate, the case of brain bisection. Brain bisection, the surgical cutting of the connection between the hemispheres of the brain at the bridge of nerves that normally joins them, the corpus callosum, was an operation that gave relief to epileptics. But experimenters working with split-brain patients in the 1960s discovered an additional result of this surgery that was startling and disturbing. When they fed markedly different information into each hemisphere, the subject would, it seemed, possess two mutually excluding experiences at one time. I'm going to give you a much simplified example of the sort of experiment that was done. Something like this was done, but this is a little simpler. Okay? So I was a split brain patient. I've got my hands hidden from my sight under the table. One object's put in one hand, another in the other. Let's say a hairbrush in one and a spoon in the other hand. Now, if I'm asked to identify what object I held, the hand that held the brush will point to a picture of the brush. The hand that held the, what was it again? Yeah, spoon, thank you. Will point to the picture of the spoon, so one hand won't know what the other's doing, in other words. So these two separated mental processes occurring in what had seemed to be one person. Okay. Let us engage in a thought experiment. Let us engage in a variation on a thought experiment in Derek Parfit's paper, Personal Identity, that dramatizes the puzzle in brain bisection. Imagine that by pressing a button, I could cause a device to anesthetize my corpus callosum, so that the communication between the hemispheres of my brain could be stopped temporarily. Tonight, a concert of my favorite music is going to be broadcast on radio, but I also have to do some tedious studying from audio tapes. You can say I came up with this example a long time ago. Well, why don't I arrange that the music will go into only the right hemisphere, which is musical, while the study material will go into only the left, which is verbal, after the button has been pushed to stop the integration of the activities of the hemispheres, and thus any distraction of either by the other. But now a big question arises. What would my evening be like? So think about this for a moment. Right? Someone is going to slog through the study, and someone is just going to be enjoying a concert, neither being having any of the other. So who's the someone? Is it going to be me? Or me and someone new? Or two new someones? You see the very profound, deep puzzle. Note that the continuing identities of the hemispheres and of the branching thought processes are not at all problematic, like the question of which of these are then mine. The hemispheres could be easily distinguished, and their distinct histories charted over time, as could the branching development of the thought into that about the concert and that about the studying. The problem, then, cannot be in the identification of these hemispheres or branchings. The problem is rather what would be making one of them, or neither of them, or both of them mine instead of somebody else's. The ordinary understanding of what a person is does not allow that I could be both enjoying the concert and suffering through the studying, since each of these experiences seems walled off from the person who is having the other. Yet it cannot be that I only enjoy the concert, or alternatively only suffer through the studying, or that I somehow experience neither. For following a more extensive anesthetizing or a stroke that completely incapacitated one hemisphere, I would certainly have had whichever experience was in the remaining functioning hemisphere. The concert experience would be mine if there were only the right hemisphere, and the studying would be mine if there were only the left. In our case, there are both. How could either experience fail to be mine merely because another one is taking place across the way? Furthermore, after the anesthetic wears off and the integration of activities in the hemispheres has returned, I will remember having had both experiences equally well. I will remember both as having been mine. But it cannot be that the memory is somehow retroactively making both to have been mine. It is rather that I am discovering what had been true at the time, but had then been hidden because of the lack of integration, that both experiences were mine when I had them. Notice that the split brain case is raising a question about the experience of time, as well as about identity. There seems to be a problem because of the objective simultaneity of the mutually excluding contents of experience. How could one person have two such mutually excluding contents of experience as the concert and the studying at the same time? But this really is no problem. As I've already pointed out, when the block is removed and the integration of the hemispheres resumes, I will be able to remember having had experience both of the concert and the studying. These past contents of my experience will then be looked upon by me as in the same sort of relation to each other and to me as any two mutually excluding contents of experience that had instead, in the usual way, not occurred in the same objective time. But what if, in the original procedure, the concert experience had been run through first, while the other hemisphere was kept inactive, and in the studying had been run through, while the concert hemisphere had been kept inactive? Thus, each experience would have occurred at an objectively different time. So what? They'd be remembered in just the same way as simply two experiences that were mine. Yet only like this could they have satisfied the mistaken requirement of not running simultaneously. How could this really be making any difference to whose experience these were? The answer to what my evening will be like then must be that I will experience both the concert and the studying, though each will seem falsely to be the whole of my experience at that time. I shall contend that it is this same false seeming that hides the fact that all experience of all conscious things at all times actually is mine and therefore yours. This is a view I call universalism. And now we're in section 3, universalism. All the experience in all the separate nervous systems of the world is mine, though what is discovered in each necessarily seems falsely to be the whole of what is mine. What makes an experience mine is none of the specification of its content, or of the particularity or other properties of experiencing organisms. All that is required for an experience to be mine is that it be immediate in its character, that it be first person in the style of the experience. That was all that made both the studying and the listening to the concert my experience. When they were later remembered as mine, what was crucial was only that both were remembered as having been immediate in the first person style. Think about what you ordinarily would recognize to be my experience now. Of course, here it's an experience of listening to me talk. What makes it mine for you? What makes this experience here having be mine? All right. Okay, what makes this experience be mine for you? Is it the detail of its content? If the colors you were seeing had been different, maybe I'd worn a different color jacket while you're looking at me, Would the experience have failed to be this, yours? Think of all the features of this experience that could be varied while its character of being mine remained untouched. If you had fallen asleep and were now in the midst of a wild dream that had little in common with any of the usual content of your experience, would that experience have therein failed to be experienced as mine? If you had eaten different particular items of food over the past years, as you might so easily have done, so that all the particular atoms in the structure of the body were different in numerical identity from those in your body now, would the experience have failed to have that character of being mine? Must you take care with the particularity of the food that you eat because it is determining the identity of an experiencer, of a subject of self-interest? If the experience were had in a different location, if it were at a different time, would the experience not still have had that same character within it of being this and being mine? My pains are pains that are not remote, like those that belong to another. My pains are those that are immediate and first person. But surely all pains must be had with this same quality of immediacy that makes them mine. What could really be a pain without its thus hurting? All hurting, then, is mine, as should be all the self-interest regarding it. My self-interested concern should be extended to all experience equally. And let me just add something about what I'm saying now. I'm claiming that in our usual way of thinking about this, the tail wags the dog. What we usually think is, what am I? Well, I'm a thing in some way. I could, according to these two main views of philosophy, be the thing as that thing, or it could be a thing insofar as it's entertaining certain kinds of mental states. But whatever I am, I'm a thing. And something to be mine would be whatever belonged to that thing. Like my shoes. And I would then think that an experience being mine is just like my shoes. It's mine simply because it belongs to that thing that I am. But this, as I say, is the tail wagging the dog. I discover which thing in the world is me by seeing who is having this experience. I am whoever is having this experience. That's the basic way in which I discover myself. I don't look over a lot of facts about the particular people in the world and decide, well, I'm that one. I'm whatever is having the experience that's this one. That's mine. Also, let me throw in that a time being now is like that too. It's only now. There's nothing objectively true of it. Makes it now. It's only now because it's the time of this experience. Now is this time. I am this person. Now, what I am saying has spectacular implications. It means that my self-interest reaches fully into the life of every conscious organism, each of which I equally am, and that the death of any one of these does not annihilate me so long as there still is any other conscious thing anywhere in all reality, since I will be that thing. And every experience in any time is experienced by me with all the same urgency of its happening now. All of it equally is mine and now. It follows also that inflicting pain as retribution for wrongs is a horrible mistake. The person wronged and the person punished are one and the same. Let's next see how a probability argument of immense power can be used by you to establish the truth of universalism. Next section, the perspectival nature of probability and inference.
can I ask for a clarification, because I didn't quite follow the last bit of that.
Yeah, sure.
Where there seemed to be an extension of the I into what we would normally regard as other distinct beings or creatures.
Yeah.
Could you just take us through?
Yeah, sure.
That,
I mean,
how that works?
I mean, if I ask, you, what are you? Right? Then you're whatever's having this experience. And what makes this the experience you're having so special? Well, there's this. That it's got the immediacy in the first person character and so on. Right? But all of experience is equally this. Right?
Is it? Is it? Because I'm having a different experience from you now.
Well, you can only say that if you beg the question. See? Okay. I mean, if you're not to beg the question, say, well, there are two organisms here, and either I'm both of them, but like in the brain bisection, the non-integration prevents me from seeing that I'm both of them, or there's some special thisness about me that makes me more this than anything else that has consciousness, and that's a mistake. It seems like that. It would seem like that because of the non-integration. Here's the only place this is happening. But that's a mistake. And there are various ways it can be shown, like this probability argument. It messes up science to do that, and so on. So, do you understand a bit more what I'm claiming?
I do. I think when we get to the discussion, it seems like it's eliding personal difference and personal identity.
Well, okay, that's something I have to work on when you get back to me at the end. Yeah, great. Well, it's a clarification. It was okay.
Yeah.
Great. Now, next section, section 4, the perspectival nature of probability and inference. I'll introduce the probability argument for universalism with making some claims about the nature of probability. It is a mistake to think simply that if a deuce of spades is drawn randomly from a deck, something has just happened with a low probability of 1 in 52. For this event at once has many other descriptions that are associated with differing probabilities. It's drawing out a spade, which had a probability of 1 in 4. Drawing out a deuce, which is 1 in 13. Drawing out a card, and if this is treated as a given, 1 in 1. Drawing out a card other than the Queen of Hearts, 51 in 52. That same event is all of these. It doesn't simply have the probability that we ordinarily assign it of 1 in 52. And a low probability at that. The salience of a description, and therein the probability of the event, will depend on a person's relationship to it. If each person in a large group had made a prediction of which card would be drawn, with the predictions pretty much covering the deck, this event would have involved a low 1 in 52 probability for someone who had predicted the deuce of spades, as it would have done for the deuce of spades itself if the card were conscious. But a high probability of 51 and 52 for someone who had predicted the Queen of Hearts. For someone just watching, there would be no improbability at all in the result. Improbability depends always on coincidence, the coincidence of two descriptions that have been independently designated, such as that in the only prediction that was mine, and that of the card that was actually drawn. When we routinely state that the deuce of spades has a 1 in 52 probability of being drawn, we are implicitly, but crucially, imagining the deuce of spades being designated independently of its being drawn. If it is merely read off as the card that was drawn, its probability of being drawn was 1 in 1. If only one person in the group that I mentioned earlier had made a prediction and had predicted the deuce of spades, the event would have been improbable to the tune of 1 in 52 for the whole group. But for an observer of many such groups, there would have been no improbability in one of the groups getting it right. That event would remain an improbable coincidence for everyone in the group, while at the same time involving no improbability for that observer, because no coincidence. Similarly, for the winner of a lottery, an improbable coincidence has occurred in the winner being him. Whereas in this same event, there was nothing improbable for an uninvolved observer. Notice, by the way, that all these probability judgments hold objectively within each of these perspectives. They are perspectival, but not subjective. I mean, it's like being 5 miles from London. Be true for some and not for others. And objectively true. Now let us shift into talking about inferences, reasoning in which we infer that something is most probably the case based on evidence. Here is an expression of the principle that I think properly governs such inferences. I'm sorry, it's a bit abstract, this, but you'll see it being illustrated. And here's my expression of the principle. It is most probable that the most probable thing will occur, or in the past has occurred. And that's part of it's been most probable. And thus, when we have evidence in competing hypotheses, that hypothesis must be judged most probable that would have made most probable the occurrence of the evidence. Okay? Because a hypothesis that would have made it improbable, right, it means that when the evidence is combined with that hypothesis, there's an improbability. You know, what's supposed to have happened. What's improbable is something improbable happened. So compared to another hypothesis without any improbability, you've got to accept that that hypothesis is more probable. I think, you know, that's how, actually I won't argue it now, but I think that all empirical reasoning is based on this. Quite simple principle. Anyway, go on. But whether an event is probable or improbable has been shown to be perspectival. Therefore, such inferences will also have to be perspectival. Consider again how the event of the winning of a lottery is improbable for the winner, but not for a non-involved observer. The circumstances of most lotteries will force the winner simply to swallow happily the indigestible improbability of his winning, after he's pinched himself to make sure he isn't dreaming, on account of other parts of his overall evidence having to be even more improbable if he was not the winner. By the way, the lottery having been fixed would not have made his winning more probable, unless somehow it would independently have been probable that he, rather than another entrant, would have been the beneficiary. But in a lottery, he's won, where each entrant has been isolated from the others, say in different rooms, and where there are two rival hypotheses equally available, only one winner or every entrant winning. The improbability of the coincidence from his perspective, if only he has won, will make it by that much more probable that every entrant winning is the case for him. Informing an uninvolved observer of this winning, however, would be giving him no evidence at all for preferring as more probable that all the entrants have won rather than only this one he's been informed of. Since the latter would have entailed no improbable coincidence for that uninvolved observer, he can have no reason to infer its improbability. Okay, and we'll be getting into more such inferences in a moment, in case you don't feel completely grasped. Section 5, the probability argument for universalism. Let me next point out that by using this same style of reasoning, one can establish the overwhelmingly greater probability that universalism is true. But first, let's consider an intermediate case. Imagine an extraordinary hotel that contains countless rooms, in each of which there is a sleeper. And let us say that there are only two ways in which what we'll call the awakening game can be played. Either all these sleepers, or players, will be awakened, or else only one, randomly. If, as a player, so imagine yourself now to be in a room as a player. If, as a player, you find yourself awake, you should use this as evidence to infer the immensely greater probability of the truth of the hypothesis that this is the version of the game in which all have been awakened. You should reason as follows. It would be immensely less probable that I would be awake if there had been only one random awakener in the countless rooms of sleepers. But it has to be immensely improbable that what is occurring is something immensely improbable. So, given this evidence, I must infer that the hypothesis of countless awakenings is immensely more probable. Okay, you get that?
I think so.
Of course, the incredibly rare awakener in a one awakening game would have been misled by this reasoning into preferring the hypothesis of countless awakenings, which would in that case have been false. But if this game had only one awakening, it would also have been overwhelmingly more probable for him that he would have been sleeping and therefore in no condition to engage in the misleading inference. That the inference is not misleading is, from his perspective, thus overwhelmingly more probable than that it is. But a non-involved observer, say on a street outside the hotel, who was given a winner's name as being that of either one of countless awakeners or that of a sole awakener, could not use his information about that awakening to infer one thing or the other. That awakening, if only one had been awakened, would entail for this observer no improbable coincidence. But next consider what you should think if you, as an awakened player, are properly assured that only one has awakened. Well, you need not simply wallow in the improbability of its having been you, as you would have to do if you stayed within the usual view of what a person is. There's an alternative hypothesis, universalism. As we've seen, this is the view that this particular experience of being me at this time is such purely because it is experienced as such, which is equally true of all experience. All experience is experienced as this happening to this experiencer, which is there in I, at this time, which is there and now, and in this place, which is there and here. Whatever the objective circumstances of the possessor of the experience and its time and place might happen to be. So this hotel awakening was not an improbable event for the awakener. That it happened to this person at this time and in this place is not at all improbable, for that's how it is in all experience. Every awakener would have been this one. And need this inference be confined to a fantastic game? No. You can make it now. The usual view of a person says that your own coming to be was unbelievably improbable. Universalism says that your coming to be was as easy as pie. Just consider the history of begettings that would have been required for you to exist on the ordinary view of the matter. Let's say conservatively that during your conception, there were 200 million sperm cells competing with each other to reach the egg first. And on the ordinary view, if any sperm cell but the one that did happen to make it had got through to the egg instead, you would never have been around and never have had this experience. This experience would never have existed. So you had only a 1 in 200 million chance of being produced from that conception. But it gets far worse than that, because in order for that conception to have occurred, your parents had to have been conceived. And in each of their conceptions, the chance of it turning out right for your later existence was, with our conservative estimate of the number of sperm cells, again 1 in 200 million. So the chance of your emerging from those three conceptions was 1 in 200 million to the third power, which is 1 in 8 septillion. Pretty slim. And of course, all ancestral begettings before these had to be just the right ones for your future existence. The number multiplied in each preceding generation, and all of it going back to the time of the dinosaurs and far earlier than that. Otherwise, it would have been eternally blank for you. You would have had no experience whatever. Only others would have been in the world instead. Only the hypothesis of universalism can relieve this improbability. It didn't matter which sperm cell hit which egg. You must be there equally in any conscious being. This is so powerful, this way of arguing. Oh, just one more example. Coin is tossed 1,000 times, lands heads 1,000 times consecutively. There are only two coins that it could be, a fair coin or a loaded coin or double-headed coin. What do you think is the case? Well, it could have been that the fair coin landed heads 1,000 times, but within the fair coin hypothesis itself, that's immensely improbable. Right? So combine it with the evidence of the coin, whatever coin it was, landing all heads, right? You've something very improbable. Well, it's improbable that something improbable was what occurred. So you naturally become very confident that it was the double-headed or the loaded coin. That's how we reason, and quite rightly. Same kind of thing is happening here. 6, the probability argument for, I think I'll go on. I was leaving this as a possible. Now let me do this one. The probability argument for many universes combined with universalism. That the universe in its fundamental determinations conforms to what is needed for life to develop is called the Anthropic principle. My favorite example of such agreement between physical law and the requirements for life is the strong nuclear force, which is one of the 4 basic forces of the universe. All protons are positively charged and therefore repel each other. How is it then that protons can stay firmly together in the nucleus of an atom? The answer is that one of the 2 nuclear forces, the strong nuclear force, attracts protons to each other more strongly than their positive charges repel them. But why then doesn't this stronger force, this attraction, pull together great heaps of protons? Well, it seems this force is stronger than the positive charges only over the very short distances within the diameter of a nucleus. It is a short-range force whose strength falls off quickly as the 7th power of the distance, unlike the long-range positive charges whose strength falls off only as the square of the distance. One more question. Why don't the protons that are within the nucleus, where the strong nuclear force is supreme, just keep pulling each other closer and closer? Here the answer is that the strong nuclear force has a strangely complex character. It suddenly becomes a repulsion when the protons get too close to each other. And so we have atoms with positively charged nuclei holding around them negatively charged electrons, just what's required for there to be chemistry and life. If the basic features of matter that we see in this universe had resulted from a physical or mathematical necessity within the nature of matter itself, so that it could never have been any different anywhere, then such agreement between these features and the requirements for life developing would have to have been nothing but a stupendously improbable coincidence. But if matter instead were extremely protean, with its basic universe-wide characteristics varying radically across countless different universes, then no coincidence would have been involved in the minuscule fraction of these varied physical worlds happening to agree in such fundamental characteristics with what was required for life to develop. Universalism must be added to the many worlds hypothesis, however, before it can explain why our particular world did not fail to be amenable to life. On the ordinary view of a person, even if there are enough varied physical worlds to eliminate the coincidence of there somewhere in physical reality being an amenable universe, from the observer's perspective, it would nevertheless be as great a coincidence that the observer's universe, that your universe, was amenable, as it would have been if there was only one physical world, and yet that was amenable to life. To eliminate the anthropic coincidence from our view, as rationality regarding the probabilities requires, we must loosen the conditions for personal identity, so that you, the observer, would automatically be in any of the universes in which the right conditions occurred. Then my universe is guaranteed to be amenable. My universe will be every universe that is a host to consciousness. Only combined with universalism can the many worlds hypothesis make probable the amenable character of our world. Consider an analogy. You have awakened in a strange room from a drugged sleep. 3 hypotheses attempting to account for your situation are offered to you. First, that you were to have been awakened only if a single predesignated number had come up on a single spin of a single roulette wheel with trillions of numbers on it. This is like the hypothesis of a single physical world that just happens to be anthropic. The second hypothesis is that there were countless such wheels being spun, so that it was to be expected that the required number would come up on some wheel, but there were also countless sleepers, each assigned to just one wheel, and awakening only should the right number come up on his wheel. Under these conditions, though it is probable there will be some awakening, in no way is your awakening, dependent still on just one wheel, made any more probable than in the first hypothesis. This, then, is like the useless combination of the many worlds hypothesis and the ordinary view of identity, a view that would confine your existence to only one region of reality where one particular organism existed, a view that would regard even an organism just like you, but in another world, as not you but a mere duplicate of you. The third hypothesis offered, the account you must accept as being overwhelmingly more probable than the others, is like the combination of many. I confused myself. The third hypothesis offered in this analogy, I forgot it was in the analogy. Third hypothesis in the analogy, the account you must accept as overwhelmingly more probable than the others, is like the combination of many worlds and universalism. It is that any sleeper would have been awakened so long as the required number came up on any of countless wheels. According to universalism, I am any conscious being. Therefore, the existence of many worlds can make probable that some world will simply become mine by producing conscious beings. That world will, of course, have consciousness producing natural laws. And it must be this combination of factors that actually is responsible for our experience of an anthropic universe. It is this, then, that gives us our physical laws. And accepting this points the way to understanding the fluid underlying nature of matter, of which the laws of our world are only one of a myriad of expressions. Now, a scientist who failed to see through the illusion of uniqueness would seem to be tied to a universe doomed to remain a terrifically improbable possessor of the sorts of laws that we find it to have. Such a scientist could thus never properly explain those laws. The seeming uniqueness of me and mine, taken as objective local determinations, will distort the way the world is seen, so that a full discovery of its universal, objective, law-like character must be impossible. Nah, continue.
I would like to come back to personal identity at some point in the conversation, but I was just wondering, is very low probability the same as improbability? Because when I heard you talking about the 1 in 100 million chance, and that's connected all the way down the line to really low probability. So the probability of me emerging or any of us is incredibly small. But that to me isn't necessarily the same as improbable. It just makes it very low probability.
Let me remind you of what I think is the basic framework of probability here, okay? You can't use anyone else's existence to infer the truth of universalism. Because anyone that is in the ordinary view regarded as another person, right? They had their own problems. They had to be lucky on their own. But you would see whoever emerged, right? So there's no coincidence for you involved. It's the coincidence that makes improbability. Okay? It's not simply some kind of someone pronouncing that it's 1 in 52, that a deuce comes out. It's a mistake. And so, if I were simply saying there's a low probability of 1 in 200 million, that wouldn't do it. It has to be improbable, as it would only be from your perspective, that you had emerged from it. So you had a bet on one of those sperm cells, like at a horse race, and yours won. That's what makes it improbable for you. I have no such involvement in your conception. Right? So, I could say it was 1 in 200 million that you would emerge, but that's, as I say, that's just imagining an independent designation of you, which you had, but I didn't. And saying to match that to what happens to emerge is improbable. So yes, improbability is this perspectival thing. It's not some kind of something built into the kinds of probabilities that we, spew out in talking about how powerful things are in the world.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can understand that, but I'm still kind of wondering.
Like with the cards, it's very easy to give an example. Let's say you would only have been awakened if the deuce of spades had been randomly drawn from the deck. Okay. And only one drawing of a card from the deck. So, and you find that you're awake. And you think, wow, that was improbable. That might, But if instead, each person in the room that you happen to walk into is bizarrely, being kept asleep, will be awakened if one card is pulled out at random, and you see Joe being awakened. So what? There's no probable coincidence for you as there is for Joe. See? And Joe, if you set it up in such a way, like with isolation and so on, that an inference can be made to try to eliminate the improbability. Joe would be able to make the inference, but you wouldn't.
Sorry, just wondering, your earlier thought experiment about the sort of isolating was it corpus callosum?
Anesthetizing it.
Anesthetizing it.
Yeah.
Is it not possible that is where you exist, and if you were to anesthetize that, you would no longer be thinking?
No, when they cut the corpus callosum, it wouldn't matter if you could, suppose human physiology was very different and, it was all in the corpus callosum, nowhere else. Not true. But, by cutting it in two, you could get these two mutually excluding experiences. So you could anesthetize just a sliver of it, if that helps you.
Right.
So that you're definitely not. And so what if you got rid of a few of the functions? There'd be experience going on in these two disconnected things, whatever area they occupied, and yet the experiences involved in both of them would have been yours, incontestably, if the lack of integration hadn't occurred. So, got the puzzle. Yes.
On the brain bisection.
Yeah.
I mean, from your reading of these people who had this stuff, was there therefore two memories? How did they? Okay, the brain
wouldn't be for them. Because there'd be memories that were
would there
not
be two
connected.
distinct memories they would have, or
I don't think the memories would be shared across at any point. That's why we have a nice anesthetizing here, so that it can wear off, and then it's integrated the way it normally is. So there'll be a memory of having enjoyed the concert.
But I mean, when these people were spoken to, did they?
Yeah.
Was there a sort of deeper sense of identity? I mean, were they aware? Was there some sort of conscious, central, other awareness of?
Yeah, I mean, they're so fascinating, these cases.
It's really
right?
very interesting.
They're tremendous.
But I wonder whether there was some sort of central. I know this is not fashionable to say this, but I wonder whether there was some sort of central sense of identity which was over and above that.
I think so. I mean, I think there was, in all the experience happening, it's happening to this person because it's got immediacy to it. So that's my, it's not some kind of strange, exotic thing. It's just this immediacy.
Can I just interject and say,
yeah, sure.
Who were the people that you? Who were the people?
Oh, these were. An operation was performed.
Yeah.
That helped epileptics that involved cutting.
Yeah.
That at the time they did the cutting, as I understand, they thought all it did was to prevent the brain from sagging. I don't know why they would wanted to allow it to sag, but anyway, so that in other words, they didn't realize that most of the integration between the hemispheres was performed by this thing.
Okay.
But then when that was realized, these experimenters went to town on them. They could see there's something very funny going on here.
It was the case that one of the sides absorbed a lot of the functions of the other side. Isn't that what happened?
No. It kept. In fact, these people didn't realize there was a problem about it. There was so much harmonizing between what happened in the hemispheres that, for the most part, they functioned like normal people. But when it was, a careful job was done of segregating what was going into each hemisphere, you had when you think about it, you would expect these disconnected experiences. So whose were they? See, that raises this wonderfully deep question about, what I am, what makes something me.
In section 1, in simple terms, you're saying we're either the physical thing, the brain, or the thoughts that take place.
Okay, I'm not saying it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This is the usual.
Yeah.
This is the usual debate in philosophy. This again.
You didn't come down in favour of any one, A or B.
I came in favor of both of them at the same time. It's good to go back to that, right? What, as I pointed out, each view is terrifically attractive when it's arguing for its own positive side, which is that a person could remain the same even though he has amnesia, even though his memories are false, he'd still be the same person. That's what they say on one side. On the other side, they say, but they then make the false move that means the bodily continuity or whatever has to be responsible, not psychological. Okay. Then the other side says, yeah, but think about this. If somehow my process of thinking of myself as Arnold Zuboff and having done this and that was moved over into another brain while it was killed here. It's problem if we leave it here. While it's killed here. Then there's someone thinking I'm Arnold Zuboff, having all the same memories, and as Locke says, it's one consciousness considering itself as itself. And that's what it is, for it to be the same person. Right? So that the identity of the things having it. I mean, I think the most sophisticated way of saying it would be, then that thing becomes me, but only by virtue of having this continued mental activity that was mine. And again, no reason is given for why to begin with it was mine instead of somebody else's. But at least it looks as though you're trying to discover here, what preserves me. So it looks as though you're getting at something about personal identity. And the thing is, as I would pointed out before, very attractive to go along with that first view that you're a thing, because it would still be you with amnesia, with it. You don't need this mental activity to be the same. But it's very attractive also to think that it would be you going forward into a new body and looking down, saying, "Hey, this isn't my body." If you saw such a thing happening, and you have enough imagination to think what it'd be like, you'd be convinced that you've gone over to that. Now, what I'm saying is that they're both right on the positive side. It doesn't matter what the body is. That's not holding you down.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what the thought processes are. What does matter is something common to all, conscious things, whatever bodies they have, whatever thought processes they have, which is, I'm this one. Okay? That's the initial event. That's what made one of them me to begin with. See, forget about trying to preserve it. You don't need to preserve it by keeping these detailed circumstances the same in some respect, because that's not what made it be me in the first place. What made it be me is, as soon as anything is conscious, it's me. It's this one. But of course, it will seem as though this is the only one that's me. Of course, as in the brain bisection case. Because it's not presented that all these others have what it takes to be me. It's not. And of course, so much of our lives, are built on this way of seeing ourselves as distinct. Boy, does it go deep. But it's a mistake.
This interests me because, fortunately, 6 years ago I had a stroke, and
Yeah.
I think I'm the same person. But people who know me before and after think I'm a different person.
Okay.
So,
Now, that's where you have to get into this question. What are you talking about when you say, is it the same person? Because I can easily say I'm a different person when I drink, or there's an ambiguity in talking about same and different with regard to persons. Okay, so if I don't know why this example comes to me. If I go on a bus with you, and I know the route and you don't, and I say, and we go 2 days consecutively, and I say, the bus driver is different. I could mean there's something about you that's different. It's the same person, but, Or I could mean they put a different bus driver in there. It's ambiguous that way. Right? So that's why at the very beginning, when I talked about being the same in the most basic sense, and what I used to signal what that was that I would look at the pains of that person as not in the way I would if I were sympathizing with someone else, but with the self-interested anticipation that's appropriate to it being me. Okay. So I don't think your friends are saying to you, the pains don't belong to the same basic subject of interest as they did, before the stroke. They're saying that it's like a bus driver behaving differently or whatever. Then that's what I think they're saying to you.
But I seem to come down on example B more, because I think the thoughts are the same, haven't changed. The memories are still the same.
Yeah, but look,
the brain's damaged.
Suppose something happened to you, and you suffered amnesia. Then you're there wondering, who the hell am I? I mean, you're this person. That's it can't fail. But you don't know the facts about this person you used to know. You could have it, or when you dream, you could experience in the dream that you're vastly different from how you are in your waking experience. So there are vast differences within that too. If I ask you to pay attention to your sensations in your feet, then I ask you to add 2 and 3, and something very different's going on between the two. But they're both yours. They're mine in the required way. But if one of them was seemingly remote and not having that immediacy and so on, then you wouldn't think of it as yours, as part of what you experience. That's all that's involved.
Can I go back to the personal identity bit?
Sure.
So let me just check. I think what you're saying is that the identity of the person can exist in different mental states and in conceivably different bodily states. I think that's what
I was just saying.
Yeah.
Yes.
What I thought you were saying earlier on, but I'm just checking now, was that there was some kind of illusion between different persons. I suspect you're not saying that.
No.
No. Yeah.
No.
Okay.
I mean,
Fine.
there aren't different persons.
Yeah, of course. That's the point of
Yeah. It's so easy in thinking about whether there's something wrong with this to fall into begging the question. One of the most common questions I have is, but then why are there different things happening in me from what's happening in you? Well, it's all happening for me. So you can't begin by asking it that way.
It's not all happening for you.
It is. Why? Because you think I'm confined within one brain and so on.
No, because I think I'm having different thoughts from the ones that you're having, which is why we're having
but there
conversation.
isn't. But there are different thoughts. There are different organisms. You've got to speak neutrally about it. Okay? I never want to say that because this is true, somehow magically there's an integration across all the nervous systems. Not at all. In fact, in brain bisection, I'm not saying that this would be kind of parody of what I think you're doing. Suppose in brain bisection, I make the claim I do, that both the enjoyment of the concert and the slugging through the study, they're both my experiences, merely on account of the immediacy in both of them, which is how I remember them as mine later. Right? So I make that claim, and then someone finds it quite convincing. Then they think, what was Zuboff saying? Oh yes, he's saying that they were the same. Oh, so he must think that they're actually being integrated. Because they think the being integrated is a requirement for sameness. See? What I'm claiming is precisely that it isn't. So you can distinguish in the world. I'm not saying there are different things around from what you think. There are a certain number of organisms here with quite distinct thoughts going on in them now. But they're all me, because they're all this person. They have what it takes for me to be me. I mean, with this brain, I rightly think that this is me. There's nothing wrong with that, right? What's wrong is not to think that it goes wider than that. That's the mistake. So I'm not saying you're not you. You're just the thing you thought you were. But it turns out that there's more of that.
Are you saying that you can't, when you said, I'm this, you are that person, and that, so you're saying it's not possible to be mistaken about you are you? That's not on what you're saying.
I see.
It's something that I can't be, when you say, but isn't this, when you say I'm this, isn't I'm thisness also dependent on some sort of external interaction? I mean, don't psychologists say this now, that actually my personal identity is built up also from interacting from my environment. And in fact, if I had no response from my environment, I might actually doubt this, I'm this.
Well, you've got a lot more environment than you thought you had. There are lots of environments for you, right? And if your hemispheres were separated and had entirely different environments, the experience they'd be having would be yours.
But you could never, what you're saying, you could never be uncertain about you being you.
Well, I think that's true. I think, if
I just wonder whether
if I say to suppose I wake up very groggy in the morning, as I sometimes do, right? And I'm not thinking, my name's Arnold Zuboff, I'm born in, no. I'm just thinking, here I am, this is me. How could I be wrong about that? I mean, gee, that's what fixes it. There's there's an angle on this that might be helpful to you with what you're asking. There's an wonderful old paper by Thomas Nagel called Physicalism. And in it, there's something that lately a lot of people are focused on, I'm glad to say. It's something that I always thought was very deep and profound. He says this: imagine we had a full description of the world, but not using in that description any token reflexives, any indexicals. So we're not saying, here or today, or, we're just describing all the facts about all the contents of the world. And that includes all the thoughts in all the minds, right? Now, if your description of the world included all of that, then there would be what I call, quoted token reflexives and so on in your description, obviously. But in other words, your description's not putting you anywhere in that world, just describing the whole world. And then his question was, is there not a fact missing from it? And that is that one of these many people being described is Tom Nagel, right? That's, to me, a very important fact, and yet it's somehow outside the description, although the description's incomplete, right? And the question is there such an additional fact? And I'm saying no. If you look in this description with all its quoted token reflection, each conscious thing is doing exactly the same. You can't locate yourself exclusively in one of them because of its being this, right? And that description is complete. That's all that the world consists in. There aren't these additional facts that not only is there going on in this mind, I'm this one, but this is this, I'm this one. Right? While the others are just that. So I've got only one self-interest to develop here, and I'm stationed in only one of these. That's a great mistake. It's as natural as can be. It will seem in each case as though that's true, simply because there isn't integration across all these brains and so on. So it seems here's the only place where it's got this character being me. Again, when you analyze what it is that makes it you, you can eliminate all these other factors, the atoms that would be in your body. None of that is of the right sort to do it. None of the particular content. All that's left is that it's from inside. So anything you remember, like in remembering after the brain bisection, that the concert was had, from here, was it appreciated? And the studying was from here. Anything that has that style, it's yours. There's nothing more that makes any of it yours than that. So it can't be confined to just one of these organisms. Although it seems to be, for each of them, confined to just, an organism. But it's a natural illusion.
So transferring the brain bisection idea, are we, all consciences, basically bisected or separated elements of one universal brain?
Okay, I don't think at all of there being a universal brain, as though all of this was hacked off from one thing. That's not required in the least by what I'm saying. In fact, nothing about the history or the relationships of these things comes into it. If there's an oyster at the bottom of the ocean that has nothing more than a dull ache, it's mine. It's my dull ache as much as any other sharp pain or whatever is mine.
Can we introduce two new concepts here, perhaps? One, individual, the other, personhood. One could state we are all, as individuals, we'll all experience what we are doing, particularly at this moment. We're not going to experience what an oyster is like at the bottom of an ocean. On attaining, perhaps, as some philosophers might say, our personhood, which is still utterly unique, on attaining full personhood, we do, in fact, have this complete interconnection with all living beings around.
No, I wouldn't say anything like that. No, I wouldn't say anything like that. First of all, I'd say, don't take it personally. Everyone does it. You're begging the question. Because you're just speaking of there being, there's me, it's one experience, or there's the oyster, it's a different one.
Well, I'm putting together a kind of an idea.
No, you are the oyster. That's what I'm saying.
Given the state of personhood I might be, but not in my individual status, I'm not. Clearly, we're not all here experiencing what it's like to be an oyster at the bottom of an ocean right
You
now.
are in the ocean experiencing what it's like to be an oyster. It's your experience. Just as, if the brain bisection were done with you, that you could carry one of the hemispheres down to the bottom of the ocean. And you could change its mental character enough so it's only experiencing a dull ache. And the dull ache would be yours. Not because the thing once was together with this, and therefore you're not an object like that. You're not look, you are objects. You're all the conscious objects in the world. But you're not some particular one of these objects, and not any of the others. They're all, the minds and all of them are your mind. But it's like brain bisection. There's no integration across them. And my claiming that they are all yours in the way I do has absolutely no implication that there's some kind of connection of the, and maybe I didn't quite get what you're saying about the persons being connected, but I thought it might be like that.
Putting the dimension of some kind of, if you like, for want of a better expression, spiritual evolution on each of us. If we are heading to some kind of higher state of consciousness, that would be the development of our unique personhood, which may well take into account the experiences of
maybe,
others in extreme empathy. You know,
but it's irrelevant to what I'm saying. Look, think of it like this. Suppose there was a great consciousness. Maybe think of it as God, who could dip into all of the nervous systems of the world to be able to experience what was going on in all of them, even though their experiences excluded each other and so on. Okay? But it's somehow all united there in his experience. Well, then he would experience what was going on in each as mine. Otherwise, he wouldn't be getting it. Right? And if you cut these tendrils going into all of them, so that there's no longer a being that can sort of discover through this integration that they're all mine, they still be mine, just as in brain bisection. But there wouldn't be a thing that knew they were all mine unless it went through this reasoning.
I'm struggling really a lot to understand what you're actually trying to tell me. But how far does it go? I mean, is it also include the table? Or
No,
it's only sentient things?
No.
But it includes an oyster, but not the table.
Look, the immediacy of experience, which is what makes it this experiencer, doesn't. I don't think tables have it. If they have it, if there's some kind of sensation tables, it's my sensation.
you're not panpsychic, you know, sense you're not advocating panpsychism.
Yeah, no, it's not panpsychism.
Only specific
No, it's
organic
not.
consciousness. Why is
I
that
mean,
there? Why not go to tables?
because it's a different kind of theory and one that I'm not very attracted to.
Well, where do you draw the line of consciousness? I mean,
No, what I'm saying is, look, to be more precise about it, okay? Any organism that is capable of consciousness is me. Now, when it's sleeping, say, maybe, and it's not, let's say, in unconscious sleep, then there's no immediacy. But we still call it me because it's got this capacity to enter into the state with that in it. Now, if there's any being that wouldn't have the immediacy involved in it, then it's not me. Because that's what I'm saying is makes it me. That's what I experience now to be what's involved in this experience belonging to
this is
me.
a product of our past. How about, okay, taking an analogy of a computer, for example,
Yeah.
pretty crude analogy, I know. But you've got a CPU, which is maybe, if you like to see that as what is actually conscious, you can spot the hard disk and give it a complete operating system, a complete new set of memories. So, in a way, is the past in that sense in any way mutable and changeable, and does it keep on changing? I mean, we can go beyond these.
Yeah, I don't think computers, the computers we have now are thinking or feeling.
We could extrapolate that.
No. I think that something could be constructed out of matter by us that would involve consciousness.
So take your brain.
Okay, but I don't think we got it yet.
That's irrelevant to our argument, though. If you could take a brain, if you were some expert neurosurgeon, could you replace your memories with someone else's memories and have a completely different set of memories, but still be the same conscious
It'd still be you. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. You could experience false memories. When you're dreaming, you usually
Or
experience
other
false
memories which are totally real.
Hmm?
Nothing false about them.
No, yeah, you could. That's right. They could be injected into you in some way.
You see, part of our issue comes with how we conceive of as where is consciousness coming from. If you go further and look into concepts involved in quantum mechanics, for example, our consciousness doesn't need to be embedded in any organic material at
That's
all. We're outside of that.
I think one of the things about this is you don't have to go into any of that. I'm not saying that materialism is true or immaterialism is true. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Whatever consciousness is, as long as there's this first-person character and this immediacy, this from here-ness in it, it's mine. That's all I'm saying. I'm not committed to any theory. I can't extend this into such a theory. I have my views about the mind-body problem. but they have nothing to do with this.
How do we live by universalism?
Okay, good. I don't see a reason for sort of working yourself up into overcoming the illusion all the time. That would be, it's so alluring, this thing. It's beyond alluring. You sink into it anytime you let go of specifically thinking about this. But you can let it color your experience. You can think of what are supposed to be others that you're dealing with as you. Now, you don't have to work yourself up again into, but you can know that if you're hurting any conscious thing, you're hurting yourself. It's your pain. And it should be avoided as much as the ones that you used to think of as the only ones that were yours. It's as long as if you understand this, you've been through the arguments, you've seen what I think is the total job you can do on it with these arguments. Then this can, as I say, color your behavior and your experience of what you thought were others. And if it became general, an understanding, or even the understanding that there is such an understanding and it's respected, and it's, people can respect what Einstein said about time and space because it's been recognized so widely, without fully understanding it. If it could be understood that, now the scientists say that not only they got rid of simultaneity being objectively there and all that kind of stuff, but of this uniqueness of the self being objective. They now have arrived in a place where they can understand the universe because of having done this, having risen above it. They're very similar illusions that we to overcome the Ptolemaic worldview that the Earth was the center. You had to get rid of the impressiveness of here, and to get rid of the false elements in the Newtonian view. You had to give up thinking that now was objective in character, and all of them are the same. Actually, they're all being here, being now, and being me are all due to the immediacy of experience that identifies whatever time it's in and place it's in that way. They're not, and if there seems to be uniqueness to a now, that there's this objective present, it will mess up your understanding of physics. If there's a uniqueness to mind, as I tried to show at the end of this, it will also mess up your physics. You can't understand what the world is. So people know that, now they all think, I'm not sure I understand just what they mean. They think, all these people I'm dealing with are me. It's sort of mistaken identity when I do bad to them because I'm doing bad to myself. It's as though I meet myself without realizing in the mirror and I assign all these nasty things that should be done to that person. And groups will no longer think of themselves as, that their borders spell out some kind of important thing about them. You still have them. You still, each organism that I am will still sort of particularly work with and have feelings about the ones around it that I also am. But one group persecuting another, for example, if this awareness somehow seeped into it, would be uneasy because these others are all as much me as
This awareness, what you call awareness, is at a very abstract meta level. And do you think that human beings are capable of getting to that level when they are very much bound into their...
In a way, I said at the beginning, I said, there's not even a point in constantly fighting the illusion. Because we're built so much to enjoy life and so on within it. Right? But if you go see a Shakespeare play and the characters are all behaving as though they're separate centers of interest, I don't mean you have to sit there gritting your teeth because it's false. You can. It's a bit like also. And one actor playing lots of parts in the play, you can refer to the characters, as distinct from each other. But you can know that beneath that, it's actually one experiencer having all the experiences of doing the acting.
I'm not convinced that you've established that it is an illusion. And 2 or 3 times tonight you've said it begs the question, but I'm wondering if you're getting the question too.
No. I try to speak neutrally.
Because I think what you've done is you've taken the model of the split hemispheres, and then you try to extend that, and I'm not sure how legitimate.
That's not how it is actually developed. The idea didn't develop that way.
Right, okay. But I'm also worried about the kind of ethical line, because it feels like a very kind of egocentric argument. That the reason I don't hurt you over there is because I'm really hurting me. Then that's a very different argument from the reason I don't hurt you over there is because you're a human being who's different from me. It's not just kind of at the kind of philosophical level. I'm worried about arguments that don't recognise the integrity of the different other.
Look, this isn't fundamentally an ethical view. Obviously, it's a metaphysical view, right? With implications for ethics, but even those are left a bit open. I'm not arguing for egoism as such. The usual view in ethics, that's egoism. If I were to discuss the usual ethical theories, I start by doing it based on thinking they're distinct centers of interest. You couldn't describe the theories if you didn't do that, right? So it changes it dramatically, right? But I have a view about morality that doesn't require understanding this metaphysical view, right? And I think makes the case for treating others in a way that you would treat yourself without claiming that they are yourself. Right? So I don't think that that's the only way you get ethics, by adopting this new view that I developed. What I think is that this is the truth about the metaphysics. It's simply true, and you have to accept it as true if you understand, all the arguments involved. So then you see what implications there may be for, how we deal with each other. And then what you see is that even the least ethically concerned of me would have to alter his behavior, his way of thinking, if he came to believe that this was true. Okay, there's no longer these chopped off beings that I am no longer fragmented into distinct eyes, where there won't be that horrible pain if it happens over in that organism, those just happen to me. That's why I don't mind so much what happens to the others. So even the least morally inclined would. Yeah.
I'm not saying anything very helpful, but somebody said about being an abstract type of thinking. And what happens to me when you're talking to me? I hear the conviction in your voice, but I can't relate to what you're saying in the sense that I have no, or me, and I'm sure I have no empirical evidence whatsoever that what you're saying happens.
It is empirical evidence. Your existence is the evidence, and there's only one hypothesis that can satisfy it. But so that's empirical evidence. But look, you're quite naturally talking as though the view is simply false, right? I'm behind your eyes with the doubts you're talking about. They're mine. Okay?
Well,
I am not just the one who spouts this stuff about universalism. I'm all the ones around the table listening to it.
It sounds religious, no?
It's not religious, because I'm not saying there's some one thing that sort of descends on all of it. I'm saying to be you isn't a matter of which thing it is. It's a matter of the style of experience. And all experience has that same style.
But how do you give up people's enjoyment of that sort of rich internal life they have, their own rich internal life? I mean,
you don't. Why would you give it up? It's yours. It's precious to you.
Well, that's right. So how can you...
That internal life, is precious to me as mine.
But it isn't yours.
That's what you say.
Well,
I've argued that it is.
Let me put it down. How can you have any love for anyone else unless one sees in that other person something that is absolutely and totally unique? Are you not denying that uniqueness in the other?
I'm not denying that organisms, to use the neutral language, instead of saying someone else, and so on, I'm not denying that organisms are unique. They're very complicated, they have very different kinds of minds, but they're all mine.
No, they're absolutely unique, beyond your mind.
No, don't...
You're equating your mind with something that is...
My mind could exist with all these characteristics you're talking about being in someone else's inserted into it. It would still be my experience of the whole change.
You've got a very westernized view of mind, I think.
No, it isn't. In fact, you know where you find this very same view? In Hinduism. It's not westernized. The Hindu mystics, in fact, talk about the Atman. The Atman is the experiencer. And what they emphasize is that it has no particular specific character. That it's a blank slate. They say, as I was saying, you are there in experiencing sensations in your feet. You are there in adding 2 and 3. So no such specific characteristics are confined the existence of the Atman, which is why in the earlier version they thought that the Atman was a pure self that could move into another body, into another style of life, and still be that which was experiencing it. Because within what we think of as one life, there's so much variation in what's experienced, and yet it's the same self, right? And then, in the Vedantic philosophy that developed later, I think what happened was that it was recognized that if the Atman has this purity about it, and surely it does, it has this complete versatility about it, and it can exist in different bodies, can exist with all different mental states, all different bodies. The Atman was one for Vedantic philosophy. There was just one self, just as I wanted. But they make it a thing. That's the difference.
Would you equate the Atman of Hinduism with the well, I suppose with Plato's demiurge, with the god of Plato, which is beyond our conception?
No, sorry. The Atman, there are lots of other things that Hindus say, of course, and some of them might resemble that. But the Atman is a focus on the character of experience, wherein what's being emphasized is the purity of its ability to enter into any particular character of experience and still be the one having all of that. Right? That's what the Atman is. Where I probably differ from that view is in a subtle but crucial way, which is, I may be wrong, I think that for the Vedantic philosophers, the Atman was a thing, a single thing that was experiencing all this. But what I think instead is there are lots of distinct things that the experience is involved in, but none of them are I, because there's one thing that is having all of it. It's because each has that style of experience in it that makes it this.
Is that not like Carl Jung's collective subconscious, perhaps?
Not at all, because, you see, again, very easy to do. Slip into thinking I'm saying there's some integration underneath. There's something, disciplining all the thoughts that they come together. I'm not saying anything of that sort. If there were, it would have no relevance to what I'm saying. If there isn't, it has no relevance to what I'm saying. I'm saying whatever it is, the demiurge you're talking about, if the demiurge has experience, then it's me. Whether it connects things together or not.
I think we've still got the concept of demiurge.
Well, I don't think demiurge is particularly connected with what I'm saying.
Okay, sorry, Atman.
I shouldn't have used it.
There is still something here which is conceivable. I don't know, I wouldn't like to push it onto the Christian point of view, but the Christian God as being utterly inconceivable, that is beyond any kind of mode of concept, if you like.
Yeah, but we think of that God as, in some very broad general sense, a thing, a particular
which
individual
is perhaps
thing.
wrong, certainly.
Right? Well, maybe that's wrong. I'm not saying that's right. But I'm not saying there's a single thing. That would be a kind of supernaturalism or whatever. I'm not subscribing to. I'm not rejecting it either. It just has nothing to do with what I'm saying. I'm saying it doesn't matter what the thing is. If it's conscious, if it's that oyster with the dull leg, it's mine. That experience is mine. And therefore the thing having it is me. Anything has my experience.
I've got a sympathy with the chap here who said about the oyster. Or let's take a fish.
Yeah.
I don't know what it means to say that you're having the experience of the fish.
If I am understood the way I've been explaining, that I'm I only insofar as the experience is immediate, and if the fish's experience is immediate, it has to be, because what would be experience if it didn't have that character to it, right?
But it's the fish's experience of the immediacy of being at the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah, and that's me. It's another version of me.
How can it be another version of you?
Things can have different versions. They can have different expressions. Things can change quite a lot and remain the same thing. Now I've defined what makes it the same thing in this case. And in the way it's defined, the fish cannot be excluded. The fish it qualifies perfectly.
But what makes you?
There's nothing in the experience I'm having now, which is my experience, right? Undeniably, for me, this is my experience.
Yeah.
There are colors in it. There are, there's all kinds of specification. I don't think any of that has to do with what makes it mine. Okay?
But interestingly, because one of the things that we've not talked about is social relationships.
Is what, sorry?
Is social relationships. So it's been very much a discussion based on the individual. Partly what makes you you is your whole kind of social history. Of your parents, who you grew up with.
Sorry, but you're doing it again.
Colleagues.
If that's what I am, this one thing whose existence for itself must seem so improbable. if that's what I am, right, then yes, I'm uniquely defined by a certain set of relationships and so on. Right? But I'm saying that what makes that be me, one of those things that has those relationships, turns out not to be the relationships. It turns out not to be anything particular in what it's thinking. It's to be me if it went on to think like a fish. But neither is it the body. Neither is it, this particular atoms are here. It's not any of that. It's just the nature of this experience within which it discovers itself to be I, to be this person. And what is that nature? It's the immediacy of it, the first person character of it. Right? And the fish experience necessarily has exactly that in it. And therefore it's necessarily mine. It doesn't have any atoms from my body in it. Right? It doesn't, my mental states are so various, right, that if you shoved that of a fish in there, maybe added memories afterwards, I could consider it, so on, it'd still be mine, be my experience. There's nothing in the nature, look, there's nothing in the nature of the mental character of the fish's experience that keeps it from being mine. And there's nothing in the particularity of the body that makes it the fish's body kind of disqualified to be mine. It's all mine.
I feel there's something not convincing about this, and there's something that is a kind of slippery move somewhere, because I recognise all you say about the changeability of the body and the conceivability of the self being embodied differently. Although I still think we might find it rather odd should we come to be in a different body. And I recognise what you say about different mental states, and clearly people can suffer kinds of injuries and all sorts of things happen to people, and aging and all that. But it feels a big step from that to the the meanness of what in the fish. I
think the experience and the memory are independent or separated from the, whatever we call it, self-consciousness or
the what?
Consciousness. No matter what you have just experienced, or no matter what kind of memory you have, no matter if from another fish or another computer, but you yourself is separated from all this.
No, I'm in all of it. I'm in all.
Yeah, because you are in that becomes why even if you have the memory from the fish, you are still who you are. But the problem is, you are the only one who knows you are there. Nobody else can have the same evidence to know you are there.
Well, if there are other minds that are mine, but thinking themselves ought to be confined, that can go through these thoughts and become convinced, like me, like this one, like this version of me, that in fact I'm all of it.
Yeah, for example,
but of course, most of the conscious things in this world can't even begin to think about this, because most of them don't have the kind of reasoning that would be required.
So someone just mentioned the social relationship. So for example, if we have two separated individuals who got exactly the same memory, exactly the same experience, exactly the same personality, everything exactly the same, but in your theory, they still have different kind of spirits.
No, I'm saying no.
But for other people, they are exactly the same, right? Because no matter what you talk anything with them,
they're qualitatively the same, right? But not numerically the same. That's what the technical way of saying it in philosophy, right? Let me say something about the first thing that started me thinking this way, because I think it's related to what you just been talking about. It's a thought experiment I did. So my friend told me that he'd read about a Russian experiment which the brains of two dogs were exchanged. And suddenly this made me think of the following. What if you know, in philosophy, you often have brains in vats that kept alive, and there are all kinds of electrodes going into them, and that can give them any pattern of experience you like. Okay, in principle, just as long as the same sort of pattern that would be coming from the senses and the bodily sensation and so on went into the brain, you would think the brain would be having exactly the same kind of experience, even though it was sitting in a vat instead of sitting in a chair at a table. But if all the same pattern of stimulation went into it, it would take itself to be sitting, right? Okay, so I imagined two brains that were identical in every way that could affect the nature of the experience they were having. Okay? And one was at one end of a table, and the other was at the other end of the table. And then a cut is made in both of them into quarters. Right? It's made in some way it doesn't disturb them somehow. They're cut into quarters. And now someone takes a quarter of the one on the right and exchanges it with the equivalent quarter of the one on the left. Now, what do you say at this point? Well, you wouldn't think that the person whose brain it was there on the right, the experiencer that was having the experience of it, had gone over to the other side of the table. Okay? You think these are I should have said this. You think that these are numerically distinct subjects of experience. That's what you would normally think. But they were qualitatively the same in their experience. Okay? Like two ashtrays of the same model at either end of the table. They're numerically distinct, this one and that one, but qualitatively the same. Okay? So that's what we got here with these brains. And their experiences. You think, okay, there are two experiences. One having to do with the brain on the right, and one having to do with the brain on the left. They're qualitatively identical, but numerically distinct. And there are two experiencers having the experiences that are similarly qualitatively identical, but numerically distinct. Okay. But now you cut them into these equivalent quarters. You exchange one quarter, and then, so the thing keeps functioning. And you think, well, the experience and the experiencer on the right side of the table wouldn't have gone over with one quarter of the brain material to the other side. Most of the other side's brain material is the same. All of it's seamlessly working together again. Right? So you think, and also you don't think the experience in person on the right is only 3/4 the experience in person that he was. He's got one seamlessly joined content of experience. One quarter is not any more his than the other. So you think that they've stayed where they were. But now you do a second quarter, and you have to conclude the same. If the one that was originally there on the right has now these 2 quarters exchanged with the other one, well, it was completely there when the first quarter was exchanged. You have to reason the same way about what is happening in the second quarter. So it would stay there. Then you do a third quarter, and you have to reason the same way about that, and fourth quarter. But the final result is the same as it would have been if you just lifted one and put it here and this one there. All the stuff that was in the brain on the left is over on the right. Right? So this is very puzzling, where are the original experiencers? What I came to realize was that we're mistaken in thinking that in the case of an experience, you could be qualitatively identical but numerically distinct. An experience is like a novel, to find an analogy, right? You can have two copies of Huckleberry Finn, one on one side of the table, one on the other. And the books, indeed, are qualitatively the same, but numerically distinct, the copies. But the novel is the same in both. Why? Because the identity of a novel depends on a certain type that it is, that can be, multiplied in different particular tokens that are of that type, right? And the same is true of an experience. An experience of being you sitting at the table just the way you are and so on, right? Would be that very same, numerically the same experience, no matter where it was had, no matter, So if the universe is big enough, and there happens to be another organism that is in all the relevant ways the same as you, so that it's having exactly the pattern of experience of being in the room, sitting in your chair, and so on. That's the experience. The experience is no more in one than it is in the other, any more than the novel Huckleberry Finn is more in one copy than it is in another. Right? And in fact, the character Huckleberry Finn is the same. And the experiencer, being the I there, in the experience of sitting there, and so on, that would be the same. See, and that was a great liberator. As I was saying when I talked about the universes, what we normally think, of course, is that if in this universe you had me, and in that you had something just like me, in every respect even, it'd be a mere duplicate of me, wouldn't be me. But what I came to realize first was that if you kept the contents the same, the experience would just be that of being me sitting here. There wouldn't be a doubleness in it of the sort that we expect, because we naturally identify ourselves in a rather sloppy way with this particular organism. So then finally, later in my thought, I came around to the sort of harder thing of what about the pattern? I mean, what happens if the pattern is changed? And what I concluded was that that's just the content of experience. The identity of the experience, that it's this experience, turns out not to depend on any of the content. It's as loosened up, in my thinking, as the particularity of the things in which it's happening. Right? That was my first step, to get rid of the tokens as at all required by my identity. The second step was to see that it didn't matter what the contents were. Of course, it wouldn't be the experience I was talking about in its specific character of sitting in the chair, listening to Zuboff from a certain angle. But it'd still be this. Being this experience is not dependent on the character of the experience. It would have this as much as any other experience has. And it would still, the time would still be this time now, whenever it was occurring. Whatever organism it was happening in would be this organism, or I.
I think we're talking about two different questions here.
Yeah.
Objective identification and subjective identification. So like you just said, if there are two completely the same individuals in completely the same environment, objectively they should be same. But from their inside, they're still different, right? Is that what you're saying?
No, I mean, I think that of course, you can say there's this occurrence here and this occurrence there on either end of the table, right? But when you think about what the identity of experience is, you have to think of it from the inside. I mean, if you don't, you're just thinking about something different from what I'm talking about. My great discovery was that there wasn't a doubleness in that thing from the inside. Right? I mean, I wasn't saying there wasn't a doubleness in the processes in the brain at all. I was saying that the experience that the process is related to, I won't say exactly how, is single, like the single novel of the very thing. That's just the metaphysics of it. That's just the way the world is carved up. That experiences don't depend on their particularity. Novels depend on their particularity. On the particular stuff that it's made out of, on location and so on. It's just not that kind of thing. It's easy to think it is, just to group it together with all those things that are like that. But it's a mistake.
So are you saying that each of us has had an immediate experience of this talk with you and discussion with you?
No.
We've all got completely different responses.
No, it's me. It's as though you took my
But
brain.
it's actually me, not
Stationed
you.
it.
It's me, and it's her, and it's him, and so everyone has a common one. Are we actually talking about commonality
But it's
or
no.
overlap of consciousness?
It's you. No, it's not an overlap either. That's suggesting
Because
an
we all have
integrated.
it by being in this experience. We all actually now have it all.
Well, no, but that doesn't integrate the brains. When I say that,
No, I'm not saying it integrates
yeah,
it,
when I
it's
say that,
individually.
yeah, when I say that the experience in either side of the brain bisection is mine, right? That doesn't mean I think suddenly that the brains get integrated, they get shared.
No, it's not that you're saying that all our experiences are now yours.
Yeah, they're all
the
mine,
original
which means they're all
experiences.
yours.
Exactly, and I'm saying so each of us are sharing a common experience, or maybe this is what you're calling the universal.
Well, each organism is me. It's me because its experience is mine. And when the tail is not wagging the dog, what makes it me is not that I'm some kind of thing with all this difficulty of defining what it is, and the experience belongs to that thing. It's rather the experience is mine in its intrinsic character.
In
the way and then whatever's having it is going to be me. Because nothing else can have my experience but me. So it
that
turns
goes
out...
for all of us in the room, isn't it?
Yeah, you're all me.
Yeah. And you're me.
Yeah, absolutely.
As well.
Oh, yeah.
So, in that, we're all sharing the same experience of
Yeah, as long as you don't...
of the experience.
As long as you don't mean by sharing some kind of integration,
No, I
right?
don't mean by
Yeah.
sharing,
I mean, in the same way I had shared within me both the experience of the concert and the studying.
Yeah.
There's the sharing. Doesn't mean that suddenly they know about each other.
And that, if that is true, then there must be a way of communication where all human groups can sort out their personal differences within a group.
Okay, wait, you could mean two things there.
I'm jumping, I know.
No. Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you very much. No, you could mean two things there. One I would agree with, or I would. Okay. You probably don't mean the one I would disagree with, which is that this means we all can zoom in on each other in our. Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. If you mean we should recognize that it's in my self-interest that all the beings I am flourish. It's equally in my self-interest. There's no self-interest confined to just one organism, as I had thought. That it's all what's happening to me. Then we, in coming to terms with that, there'll be a lot of important communication among the things that, are capable of it.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
I can't grasp the concept that you're trying to put across. I have a kind of feeling of what you're trying to say, but that's as far as it goes for me right now. I can't.
Okay.
I'm so focused on interpreting things in terms of me, and
Yeah,
I
sure.
can't really get this yet. But I would
understand.
like to read some more about it. Can you
Yes,
recommend something so that one can gradually maybe absorb it more in an hour or so? I just
Yeah,
can't
first of
grasp
all, what I read out, I think is going to be sent to everyone, isn't it? What I read out is going to be sent to everybody?
If they want to, yes, of course. Yes.
Or I thought you were just going to automatically send it out to
I
everyone.
will send it to all the mailing lists that they have to.
Yeah, and I
You've got lots of
also,
emails. Yes.
you may notice I put my email address on
Did
it.
you put your email here?
I'd be very happy to,
Did you put
really
your
happy,
email
you know,
Yeah, I saw that
communicate
somewhere.
with you
Oh.
further in any way, might be nice for you.
I just want to
So,
understand what you're saying.
yeah, I want you to.
Okay.
'Cause
Yeah.
that's more of me understanding.
Send email everyone if you.
You're so well. So well.
You're doing well.
That's what you said at the end.